The following podcast is brought to you by the Booked Podcast store at bookedpodcast.myshopify.com. We started this podcast with the dream of bringing great literary works to listeners everywhere, and overall, I think we've done a pretty good job. But you can always do more, right? A little over a year ago, I was approached via email by a Nigerian prince who was going through some weird legal issues that I can't get into here for reasons of national security, but we eventually struck up a deal that helped me perfect our newest product, Literary Force Plus. With Literary Force Plus, you no longer have to listen to really long, meandering podcasts to improve your literary prowess. The special proprietary formula we've put together will guarantee you make better reading choices, read longer books, and never, ever pick up another sci-fi book. With Literary Force Plus, you'll move right past the Pattersons and pick up a Clevenger. You'll forego George R.R. Martin and pick up a Josh Mallerman. Early feedback even indicates that you'll understand what you're reading better and won't always have to have Rob explain it to you like you're a fucking 5-year-old. It really works. I've been using Literary Force Plus myself and haven't read a Stephanie Meyer's book in years. I know you might be skeptical, but now's the perfect time to try Literary Force Plus, as we're offering it at a 50% discount, and if you order in the next half hour, we'll throw in free shipping. We're practically losing money on this deal. Don't let the globalists decide what your next read is. Take back control of your own literary destiny with Literary Force Plus, only at bookpodcast.myshopify.com. Every sale helps fund the war on poor literary choices.
Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livius Nedden. This is part 2 of our conspiracy theory episode because it just keeps going and going and going. So none of this is going to make any sense if you don't skip back one episode and listen to the first part. So if you've done that, you're ready to go. If not, we'll see you back here in like an hour or so. Next,
Sure.
We're going to talk about two different people. And these are people, and this will tie into our kind of last one too, right? So these are two people that it's not a conspiracy. They are both dead. The conspiracy comes in the cause of their deaths or the reason behind. The first one we're going to talk about is Michael Hastings. He died in a car accident in June of 2013. So not a real big deal, right? I mean, he's a writer for Rolling Stone. He died in a car accident. There doesn't seem like there's a lot there. But Hastings wrote some things and was investigating some things that were probably outside the purview of Rolling Stone. They're the things you figure would be exposés in the New York Times or the Washington Post or something, and not typically, what we think of as an aging rock and roll magazine.
Yeah, so he did. I guess he got an award for writing The Runaway General, which is a profile on General Stanley McChrystal. It's obvious that I'm reading this off of something, but that's fine. Commander of NATO's International Security Assistance Force in the Afghanistan War, sorry. And then before his death, it was rumored that he was writing a piece on the head of the CIA, I believe, that was like a critical piece, not like a puff piece. Like, hey, look at how great the head of the CIA is. Something very critical, and so. That was kind of rumored to be part of maybe why it wasn't an accident, and it might have actually been planned.
I heard someone speak about it on a podcast recently. Hastings had gone over to wherever McChrystal was. It wasn't a book. I think that was just an article that he wrote. But he was there, and something happened, and he wound up being delayed there for a while. There was some type of, I don't remember what it was, weather or something. So he wound up hanging out with these military guys. He was supposed to be there for 2 or 3 days. He wound up being there for like 2 weeks. So he got to know all these people, and they got really comfortable with him. And apparently he reported that General McChrystal had said some very negative things about Obama, to which Obama at one point said the conduct represented in the recently published article does not meet the standard that should be met by set by a commanding general. It undermines civilian control of the military that is at the core of our democratic system. So he had said some pretty negative things. So McChrystal resigned from that. So there might be some military issues at play there for him exposing high leadership in the military, being on board with the commander in chief. And then there's the things that you had talked about him working on an article about the head of the CIA.
The delay when he was with McChrystal was I don't know if you remember this, but there was a volcanic eruption in Iceland in 2010 that like basically interrupted all travel between the United States and Europe for I think fucking like a month and a half, something like that.
Yep. So yeah, he was there for a long time. So you might say, well, why are we just talking about this guy? He still wound up dying in a car accident. Well, there seems to be evidence pointing to the fact that the car accident was necessarily no fault of his own.
Yeah, it's tricky because like you can watch. There's videos out there if you search for Michael Hastings on YouTube. One of the things is going to be the actual like some security footage of the actual accident that's really poor. There's also like some sort of journalist who appeared on the scene. Did you see Nightcrawler, the movie?
I did.
It's very much like that. This guy was just sitting somewhere listening to the police band. Mm-hmm. and heard about the crash, heard the calls coming in, and like basically beat everybody to the scene and was recording like the car burning and stuff like that. That's the tricky thing from the information I was able to kind of gather in the little time I spent. It doesn't seem like there's any like rock solid evidence of anything like any tampering or anything like that. Like all of the conclusions from the LAPD and everybody else who investigated all pointed to it was just a regular, he hit a tree. Even the video footage where, he's basically speeding, he's going super fast, he ran a red light, all that kind of stuff. The only thing that's weird is like, it seems like there's like some minor kind of something happening before he hits the tree, and there's multiple explosions when he hits the tree. So that looks a little bit shady. So initially it doesn't really look like there's any obvious like tampering. Is that kind of what you got too?
Yes. Here's where it gets interesting though. So I guess for this next part, I just have to are you on board with WikiLeaks? Or are you? So let me preface this for listeners by saying that nobody has ever successfully proven anything WikiLeaks has said to be false. So that's like factual information. Nobody has ever been able to debunk WikiLeaks.
Okay.
Okay. And so I just want to preface that with most times when WikiLeaks comes out with something, nobody even tries to debunk it. They usually try to explain why this happened instead of trying to debunk the actual report. And he told WikiLeaks that the FBI was investigating him because of a story he was onto. So now you take that into account, that he actually reached out and was willing to share some information with WikiLeaks right before he was killed. And then you look at the fact that he has, and this came up on the podcast a little while ago, I don't remember why we were talking about it, but he had a car that potentially could be hacked and control could be taken. So the car that he was driving does qualify to be remote controlled by a hacker. Yeah. And apparently he was driving in a way that was erratic and inconsistent with how somebody would drive in that area, but there were no drugs in his, you know what I mean? Like, so when you start putting all these things together, you do start seeing something that looks a little bit sketchy.
Yeah, and I'm just reading off of the Wikipedia article, so it's no WikiLeaks as far as like bulletproof facts, but there was also something saying that he went to his neighbor and asked to borrow their car because he didn't feel safe driving his own car, but they wouldn't let him or something like that. And that's one of those things where like that, did that come out independently in a way that could be like verified as not being like the neighbor later just wanted to be a part of a conspiracy? I don't know.
So with that information on the table, we're going to talk about another one, and then maybe we can circle back and see if we're in agreement on both of these or how we feel about them. And I'm going to let you cover this next one a little bit. Seth Rich.
Yeah, so Seth Rich he's dead. He worked with the Democratic National Committee, and he was killed. He lived in Washington, D.C. He was killed by gunshot. Like, he was in his neighborhood, I believe, and just like shot and killed. And this was after the DNC emails leaked in 2016. And it was all around the time where, like, the Hillary and all the emails and all this stuff was like kind of really blowing up. And so this guy was murdered. You can tell I don't have a lot of facts in my head. I'm just kind of going off the cuff here, but that's okay. And it seemed like it was pretty much just considered a tragedy until Fox News, and then I think other organizations as well, started spreading the idea that he was killed because he was the one who leaked DNC emails, which there was no proof of, and they didn't have anything to back it up. But as far as I'm aware, but that, like, they started that story, and I feel like it kind of spread out to other news outlets as well. But then it was later debunked, and actually I think Fox is getting sued by Seth Rich's family for putting them through like this horrible ordeal.
Right. Now so in your note, this is what I want to talk about, that you said that it was debunked.
Yeah.
Can you give me some information on the debunking? And I know that sounds like I'm trying to set you up for something, and I'm truly not.
You're like, but wait. Okay, so I don't have information on the specific. But I'll read you a little bit. So it was debunked by like general law enforcement, basically anybody who was investigating, as well as, and I'm reading again, fact-checking websites like PolitiFact, Snopes, and factcheck.org. Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia described the murder as related to a bungled attempted robbery, said the assertions put forward by whoever put them forward were unfounded. So they're not pointing to specific reasons why, but I'm guessing they're just basically saying there's no proof that he was the one that leaked emails.
Yeah. Yes. So my understanding of this, and I've looked up almost nothing on this except the date.
Basically, there's no evidence that he leaked it, so implying that he was killed, I'm guessing, by the DNC for being a leaker. There's nothing to support that, and that's how it got debunked.
Right. So I don't know that that's what I would call debunking. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk about this in relation to Michael Hastings. So saying there isn't proof of something is probably not, because I've heard the media use debunk, so I'm really not calling you out on this. Saying there's no evidence doesn't debunk something. Having evidence contrary to something is really debunking something. So, for example, had they have said, well, this was debunked because we arrested the 16-year-old kid and his two friends. We found the gun. They had the gun. Fingerprints were on the gun, and they had his wallet in their back pocket. I would say, well, that's probably debunking. I don't know if we actually even talked about it, right? So it was that the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, some part of the Clinton machine was responsible for this because it was believed that he was going to be testifying to the FBI regarding Hillary Clinton and the email servers and perhaps some other stuff. That's the way I understand the story.
Like Russian collusion and all that shit, yeah. But here's the problem with that is, like, you can't prove the absence of something.
Correct.
You can't prove a negative.
Absolutely.
So, like, there's no way for me to prove that he didn't do something, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
No, but that's what I'm trying to say, is saying there's no evidence that this happened. They don't have any evidence of anything. They say it's a bungled burglary, but they never got anybody. They never got a suspect in custody. They never even got anybody for doing it.
Yeah.
I would, you know what I'm saying? I would say that's more debunking.
Well, yeah, but you could just lay anything at his doorstep. Then you could be like, well, he's the one that planned 9/11, and
sure,
since there's
absolutely.
no proof that he didn't,
for sure. We'll go back to WikiLeaks just for a minute. They, I believe, still have, unless they've retracted this. At the time, they were offering $20,000 for information on Seth Rich's killer.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
So you know what I mean. So there's somebody else that's, and again, depending on how you feel about WikiLeaks,
let's write into WikiLeaks and be like, well, it wasn't so and so, and then collect our $20,000.
But quite clearly, they believed there was something, or they wouldn't have offered $20,000 as a reward.
Gotcha.
So that makes a little bit of sense. So here we have two of them. I mean, I can kind of see where you're at on this one. I don't think I need to. But overall, these are two examples of just a small percentage of things like this. So there's a Clinton death list that you can look up online of all the people that died that were, well, but I'm saying it exists. Yeah. You're familiar with it, right? I mean, not maybe intimately familiar with it.
I wrote it.
So we go back to this thing about power and control. Do you believe that there are people in the current government and previous government and governments other places in the world that would be willing to kill somebody rather than have something exposed. If it's simple financial corruption, if it's embarrassment, if it's something that could cause impeachment. Do you think, based on the conversation, and this is why I wanted to talk about the Illuminati or the New World Order or globalists, I get the feeling that you wouldn't be on board with, I'd probably bring up 20 other situations where it would be kind of the same thing. Like, there's not a whole lot of evidence against it, but there are situations these people were tied to things. So are you on the thing that this is something that just couldn't happen? Like, no matter what story I pulled up?
No, I think it's absolutely possible. Yeah, I think that there's definitely, I would be kind of naive to not believe that, governments or whoever do like clandestine assassination. I mean, it has to happen, right?
I mean, that's where I'm at. And I don't feel that our government, current, previous, former, whatever, are beyond that.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they do.
So again, how do I feel in these particular cases? I don't really have a one way or the other. The Michael Hastings one really kind of stinks because there is evidence. He did embarrass the government. He embarrassed the army in places. He was about to perhaps expose someone in the CIA. I mean, that's factual information, right? So we can go back to Seth Rich and say, well, we don't even know how involved he was in the emails. Like, we just don't know.
Right.
But Hastings, if I had to pick yes or no, I'm saying yes, somebody killed him. It was likely somebody tied into the government. Seth Rich, I'm not saying no, because there's not a ton of evidence that he had any knowledge that could have hurt somebody. But if he did, if we conclusively prove that he had access to those emails, that he gave them to WikiLeaks or whatever, I mean, that would pretty much swing my vote pretty quickly as to he was killed off by a government hit team.
So you're in or out?
All right, I'm out on Rich.
Together. Yeah.
I'm in on Hastings, but overall, these things, I'm borderline more in than out on most of them.
All right, so here's my approach. One of the things too that I read was that Michael Hastings was kind of big on fighting against what he called a government war on journalism. Plus, like, all the things that Livius said kind of lead toward this guy. This guy probably was a little bit in over his head about, the stuff that he was reporting on and stuff. Like, even experts in the Wikipedia thing that I read said that the way that the accident happened was consistent with a car cyber attack. So it leans in the direction of, like, it all kind of fits. It all makes sense, right? Like, there's definitely a motive, and there's definitely, like, the people he were messing with would probably have the ability to kill him in the way that he died. So I'm a little bit more leaning on, like, this one stinks. As far as the Seth Rich thing goes, again, like, it's 50-50. Like, each argument is equal because there's really no evidence anywhere. I think Olivius, you even said that. There's no evidence on either side, so it could be anything. If I were to be like Red from the Blacklist and kind of look at it from that perspective, I would say that, like, this was a guy that there was a situation that needed to be like zipped up, and they dropped it on this guy who had nothing to do with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was the fall guy for, and now no one's worried about this one thing anymore because this guy died, and obviously he was the one that was the bad dude or whatever. I mean, but that's TV show fantasy shit. I don't think that there's enough to say anything one way or another about Seth Rich, other than the fact that, like, no one should get shot and killed. So, well, I guess that's a little bit. Some people, no, I don't think anybody should get. I don't know. I don't want to take a position on that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe sometimes people should get shot and killed. That's going to be at the beginning of the episode. Now I know it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm in as far as the Michael Hastings story goes, and I'm out as far as Seth Rich goes.
All right. That's fair. We match on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's tough. Would Snowden have disappeared in a bungled robbery or a car accident if maybe someone knew that he was about to leak information about the government spying on people? I mean, yes, I think so, for sure. I think that's embarrassing enough to the government, and has, could have potentially gone a lot worse than it did, with civil unrest and things like that. That, yeah, I absolutely don't think that the government's beyond doing that. And he's a perfect example.
Yeah, well, while I agree with you, playing devil's advocate, I guess until you actually leak stuff, it's not a crime. But like if they knew he was like, even if he took information that he wasn't supposed to, in the way that, like, I didn't watch that Snowden movie, I don't really know much about him. Like, if he took information, even with like the perceived intent to leak it, wouldn't that be enough for someone to arrest him and like try him for treason, like for leaking state secrets or stealing state secrets?
For sure it would have been, absolutely. The problem with that is, how do you keep him from still leaking it?
Oh, well, I mean, he's under arrest.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that there aren't files. There aren't, you know what I mean? There's other ways that can happen. And even though you're in prison, that doesn't mean that you don't have a platform.
Oh, like he could. Well, yeah, but like if you're, I mean, once you're like committing treason, I'm sure they put you in Guantanamo, and it's not like you can get a message out to your lawyer or something like that.
I guess that's true too.
So, I mean, I don't know, but I'm guessing that it's a little bit tighter of a ship in those situations.
Julian Assange has been living in a fucking embassy for how long now?
Yeah.
The founder of WikiLeaks.
It's been like a decade, right?
Yeah, and I imagine that there are plenty of world governments, ours included, that would be happy to put a bullet in his head, because of how credible he is as a person. Like I said, there's really nothing that's ever been disputed that's come out of WikiLeaks, and all of that is, approved by him. So I would think that, if they had an opportunity to, that they'd put a bullet in that guy's head just to make sure. So the difference is, I come across some clandestine information that's super important, right? And I go and I make a YouTube video and I sound like the flat earth guy, right? Like just not super credible, and nobody knows who I am, and I have like 4 subscribers. No big deal. But I send the same evidence to Julian Assange, and WikiLeaks puts it out. Well, guess what? The world believes. A good portion of the world believes. So his credibility and willingness to out governments for maybe doing things that are contrary to the public good is probably enough to put him on the top of a death list for a lot of countries, the United States included.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I would assume so. My question about, and I don't want to linger on him, is I've only been noticing recently, and this could have been like the thing all along, or I don't know if something happened or whatever, but like I'm picking up that Julian Assange kind of is using information to leverage like specific results that benefit certain people. Does that sound familiar at all?
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't know. Yeah. Yes, it's possible. It does seem like, so he's become a much smaller player of late. I mean, yeah, it got to the point where he's not even allowed internet where he's at, or outside communication with the world. So he's really become just a name and a figurehead at this point. So I don't know who's actually running WikiLeaks. I think the person who's running WikiLeaks doesn't want people to know who's running WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly not him anymore. But yeah, I mean, certainly that's possible. It's also possible that he's only given information from one side. So he's not. My understanding of WikiLeaks is that Julian Assange is not like some super fucking detective like there is on a TV show who finds out all this stuff. He is made a platform where people who want to be believed, or maybe have nowhere else to go with their evidence, where they put it. And he's always kept his sources confidential, so there's safety in that. But clearly there's some kind of vetting process, or WikiLeaks would have been proven to be false a long time ago and lost all its credibility.
No, it's I guess my concern is if he's only putting out, he's only leaking stuff that impacts a specific group of people, or always has a positive outcome to one side. Doesn't that like in itself kind of mess with the credibility of the person?
Yes and no. So that doesn't mean that stuff didn't happen.
Right, but he's not. But he's
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
So
you know what I'm
if
saying.
both of us did something and someone only came out and said you did it, that doesn't make you any less of a bad person. It just doesn't point a finger at me for doing the
Right.
same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, yes, I get what you're saying, and maybe it's not necessarily fair. And honestly, I don't know, because we would have to know what information was provided to him.
And I don't care that much.
Well, that's well, we would never know, right? If he chose to not address something, we wouldn't know because it was provided in secret and it was just vetoed or whatever for not being produced. So, at any rate, yeah, man, we're way off the beaten path. So, if you're still listening, we've been at this for almost an hour and a half, and we're still not done. But it's time to pay some bills. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hi, this is Adam in Oshkosh, whose legs don't work. I used to read vapid, forgettable science fiction and self-help books, and I wasn't very bright. I thought Ayn Rand was deep. But then I found out about Literary Force Plus. After using Literary Force Plus for just 1 week, I was able to read the entire book anthology in less time than it was taking me to read and understand just one Fred Venturini story. And before Literary Force Plus, I would have no idea what was happening in any David James Keaton story. But now I'm ready to take on one of his famously still printing screenplays. Once his patented formula really got into my blood, I knew I'd never pick up a Hugo Award-winning book ever again. Life is looking up with future full of raw shark texts and headfuls of ghosts. With free shipping and 50% off, you'd be as foolish as I used to be if you pass up a chance to gain 310% comprehension increases in all of the quality fiction you can now run past your eyeballs. It's like turning $2 into $4 for your taste in books. Get Literary Force Plus at bookpodcast.myshopify.com or Libizon.com. I don't even know why other websites exist, because Libizon.com and Literary Force Plus are all the internet is good for. Literary Force Plus.
All right, listeners, welcome back. We are continuing our conversation about conspiracy theories. Livius, what do we got up next?
So we're going to hopefully a little more levity at this point, right? So we've talked about some pretty serious stuff.
I thought this was going to be a lot more funny of an episode than it's turned out to be.
Yeah, well, that's the problem is you have a borderline conspiracy theorist on the other end that takes half of the shit seriously. So
Yeah.
I'm taking it all seriously. For the sake of this conversation, I really want to play devil's advocate on all of it. So this kind of ties into our last segment, but it's completely different. So Seth Rich was a name nobody knew prior to his dying, right? Michael Hastings was a name nobody knew unless you were a fan of Rolling Stone. And I don't mean to discredit him. What I'm saying is it wasn't a name that was in all of our mouths. I imagine 95% of people had no idea who he was the day he died. But there have been a lot of celebrity death conspiracies. Mm-hmm. And really, there are different ones. So we're going to focus on a couple, but who knows, some of these may come up because I was thinking about celebrity deaths, and really what we want to talk about is Britney Spears being replaced, right? By Britney Spears. Yeah. But I started thinking about this and how much there is around celebrities. So I don't think we need to dive into why, right? They're celebrities, they're important to people, their names everybody knows, and anytime something's slightly off kilter, we assume that there's nefarious things at play. So the one that we're going to talk about is the kind of death and switch, right? Yeah. So Britney Spears died. Maybe let's get into that first, and then we'll talk about some of the other ways that this can go down.
All right. You want me to kick this off?
Yes, please.
So from what I read, the general understanding is, and I really don't believe a lot of this or any of it. So I'm going to just say what I read and heard. Hold
on a second. Let me be done being shocked that you don't believe any of these.
Okay. Do you need a moment? The general idea was that at one point, Britney Spears, the thing I heard, and this will be nice because you might have heard something separately, was in a car accident that also involved Justin Timberlake and was decapitated. And so they cloned her to replace her with a clone. So she's dead, but her clone took over her place. Justin Timberlake in a coma, but his clone is going along as him.
Wow. So I had heard or seen things about Britney, and I didn't look into it because I thought it was all just garbage, crazy bullshit, right? Yeah. So that is hysterical. I mean, so let's analyze why somebody would think that, right? Avril Lavigne also has been replaced. I'm sure you know this, right?
Oh, I forgot about that. Yes, I have heard that.
So Avril Lavigne's replacement kind of came out because she was gone for a few years, kind of off the scene, came back. She grew up a little bit, looked a little different, maybe sounded a little different, right? So I'm sure the Britney Spears thing was probably spurned by a similar type of transformation.
Yeah, it was around the head shaving incident.
Right. Yeah. So, so you get that, but I'm trying, yeah, I guess if Britney Spears is around, there'd still be more money to be made, but it's just kind of tougher to swallow that, you replace them with a fucking clone, which I'm pretty sure we still can't do, right? I mean, you're on the side of science, and we just can't fully clone a fully formed adult human being right now. Can we?
No, I think we're still stuck at sheep.
When they clone sheep, do you know anything about cloning, or am I just asking questions that just?
I mean, we'll find out depending on your question.
So what you're saying though is they're cloning like a fully grown sheep?
No, so it's it's just like they're cloning an embryo, like it has to grow up.
Right.
Yeah,
well, that's I guess that's what I was trying to get at. That's what I thought they were able to do, and that would mean that we'd have a 30-year-old Britney Spears, 28 years after this
exactly.
happened, right? So it's kind of a problem there for that one.
Yeah, there's no like celebrity photocopier yet that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and that one's just bad. I mean, that's just bad for the fact that Britney Spears at the time that this happened, Justin Timberlake has been a successful and top musician. I mean, from the time he broke off from, was it the Backstreet Boys? I'm not that familiar. He broke from NSYNC, right? And kind of launched himself to stardom and is still there now. Britney Spears had that weird dip where she was doing that fucking reality show with her husband and like she was kind of, I don't want to say down and out. I'm sure there was still a lot of money there, but it just doesn't seem like that's where you would use these resources.
Especially with, and I might dip into my own little like conspiracy theory here, but I'm pretty sure this is how it works. Like essentially like the recording industry, when you have a pop star like Britney Spears, they don't do anything except for have a voice and a look, right? Like the recording industry writes the songs, they give you the music, and they prepackage everything. You just show up and you do it, is my understanding. So
for a lot of pop stars, yeah.
Yeah. So why would they need to hold on to Britney when there's like, I mean, an infinite line of people who have a look and a voice that could just step in? I mean, you have to build a brand, but how long does that take?
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. That one just doesn't. If we had the same conversation and you said it was Barack Obama was killed in a car accident and we replaced the leader of the free world with a clone so that we could keep things going, like I could. I don't want to say I'd buy into
more
that.
At stake. Yeah,
it would be more credible.
Yeah.
Than Avril Lavigne, Britney Spears.
Yeah, I agree.
In taking that approach, though, let's talk about Paul McCartney.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to let you take the wheel on this one because you're older.
It is believed that Paul McCartney, before my time, so to say that, was replaced by a different Paul McCartney. And I'm not even going to get into all the details on that. But it's a widely known conspiracy theory, maybe even more so than the Britney Spears and Avril Lavigne thing.
Yeah.
But that to me makes more sense.
So like, and then the clues being like him being barefoot on the cover of Abbey Road, being the dead person, and all the lyrics about Paul's dead or whatever that they said. Yeah.
But in examining it, that would have made more sense, that there was a lookalike Paul McCartney that they put into the Beatles, who were the biggest band in the world at the time. And at the time were the biggest, how do I say this? Like, there wasn't, like today we have like a million genres for music, right? And there is a top player at the top of each of those genres, or a top 10, and they're all wildly successful, right?
Yeah.
Back when the Beatles were around, when you said like the Beatles was somebody's favorite band, it wasn't an eighth of the population or a 30th of the population. There didn't seem to be that many choices. They were on the lips of every teenager in the world.
Yeah, they were a global sensation, yeah.
Sure, if you've got, Ariana Grande, if you're into pop or hip hop or whatever, that might be your thing. But if you're into metal, it's somebody else. Or if you're into alternative, it's, you know what I mean? Like there's a bigger disparity in
if you're into SoundCloud rappers, there's
Right, yeah. So but this goes back to Denver Airport, right? If the Beatles did that, what benefit would there have been for them to give hints that it's really not Paul McCartney? Like they're not. The Beatles were a musical sensation. They weren't a dime store novel, right? That provides you with clues throughout. So at the end, you could be like, "Oh, I knew it was the butler that did it." Like, there's no good reason to do that,
right? Because I just remembered it was "I Buried Paul" was something that they had in one of their songs. Don't ask me to remember which one, but same thing with Britney Spears. There was allegedly a song, and again, no credibility to this, but there was a song that the original lyrics were like, at one point, "She's a clone, she's a clone, she's a clone," and then they changed it to "She is gone" or something like that. But I agree with you. Why would, I mean, unless it's like John Lennon was so distraught that like he snuck it in there because that was his way of coping with what went on. I don't know. We all look for a narrative and things, right?
Yeah. I mean, we can get into John Lennon too and how he was killed by the American government, right? Like there's a bunch of different shit there. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that if you and I had the time and really the desire, the strength, the stamina, we could just pick a celebrity and then go back and try to look for evidence that they were replaced at some point.
Oh yeah.
And if we looked hard enough, we would probably find some clues. And if we presented them well enough, there might be people that believe that.
Mm-hmm. And it's never the evidence is never something like, well, they had a tattoo and now it's gone, or like there was a birthmark, and you know what I'm saying? It's never anything that other than like a song lyric, or, you know, this is what I feel or something, or they look different or they sound different. Things that could be explained away by like age, or, you know, you drink too much and it fucks up your vocal cords or something like that.
So yeah, so what I'll call the death and switch. I'm a nay on all of them.
I'm way out, way out,
way out on all of them.
The Bubba Hotep.
Well, that's what I'm gonna get into next. So it occurred to me, and I knew why, right? So I guess I'll go through my thought process. Well, of course, because they're celebrities, and if something happens, you want to know the reason, and it could be they've been replaced by a clone or a lookalike, or you just don't want to believe that they're dead because you love them and their music meant something to you, or whatever. So I recently had I don't want to say an experience, that doesn't sound right, but I wound up watching some old music videos, like stuff from like the 80s, and Under Pressure from David Bowie and Queen came up on the playlist. I've often said in discussing with people, I think it might be the greatest song ever written. Not really open to debating that with people. It's just kind of how I feel about it. And I guess, you know, it's not something I listen to very often, but whenever it comes on, I honestly feel that there was something really special that happened there. So, you know, I've known Freddie Mercury has been dead since whatever, 92 or whenever. He's been dead a long time, right? But David Bowie died more recently. It's been, 2 years now?
Yeah, I think it's almost 3 years now.
Yeah. So I don't know that I've heard this song since then, or I was watching the video for it and it occurred to me that both of them are dead. Now I'm a pretty big Queen fan. I was not a fan of David Bowie at all, other than the fact that I think that he participated in the greatest song ever written, which is kind of a weird thing to say, right? But like, I was struck by the fact that the two guys that wrote what I think is one of the best songs ever written are both dead, you know, and it made me really sad. So now I'm trying to follow that through this conspiracy theory thing and thinking to myself, like, how affected would I have been if David Bowie was the most important musician ever by that? And maybe in your head, you try to make excuses for it, right? Like people have done for, say, Elvis or Tupac Shakur, right? Like you might start to argue that they're not dead, that they have faked their death. So the first one we have is death and switch, right? We've been switched out because that person died. But then you have the fake death, right? So Elvis and Tupac are the two big ones that are musicians, right? The third big one that came to mind was Hitler.
Yeah.
That comes up a lot as fake death and went on to live a long and whatever healthy, happy life in Argentina, or if you're Elvis, anywhere that people see an overweight, older Southern gentleman. And Tupac, I don't know if there's been any Tupac sightings, right?
He just keeps dropping albums, I think was the
Well,
thing.
he does keep making albums, which is also maybe indicative of, I mean, that's like a pretty good reason, right? Like,
I don't know.
Albums keep coming out.
You think about Prince's vault.
Oh, I know.
I mean, yeah. Tupac could have just been like real into recording while he was alive.
Yep. So there's those conspiracy theories, which are also really weird. Like they just needed to get out of the public. Well, in the case of Elvis and Tupac Shakur, just wanted out of the public eye.
Yeah.
Hitler was a whole different thing, right? But then there's a third one, and that's questions regarding cause of death. And that one is where the conspiracy theories really amp up. So that's like the Seth Rich and Michael Hastings thing. Like they die, they died. We know how they died: gunshot and car accident. But then you start talking about, Kurt Cobain is one that comes up a lot, right? Like there's some questions about his ability to shotgun himself to death. Due to the number of whatever it was barbiturates I think that were in his system at the time.
I think it was straight up heroin. But
yeah, you know what I mean.
Wrong.
So you get questions like that. Marilyn Monroe. There are a lot of people say that there's no way she overdosed on drugs. There's John F. Kennedy. It's a little different one, right? Like
the grassy,
the multiple shooters, and that kind of stuff. So George Reeves is another. Do you know who George Reeves is?
No, I do not.
George Reeves was an actor in the 1930s. He played Superman originally.
He was Christopher Reeve's dad. Okay, I know who you're talking about.
He was not Christopher Reeve's dad. There's a conspiracy theory there. I'm sure the only guy's named Reeves would play Superman, right? But he was, suicide / murdered / whatever, and it's one of the earlier celebrity kind of conspiracy theories that I'm aware of, anyway. Natalie Wood is another big one, right? Because the two guys that were with her the day she died, kind of drowning mysteriously when she was already terribly afraid of water, they're both still alive and kicking. One of them is Christopher Walken, and I forget who the other guy's name is, but he's still alive too, I believe. Those guys went on to like long, successful, movie and TV show careers and stuff, and she died, after they had a few drinks and she mysteriously
drowned. Yeah, cool. I remember that.
Yeah, that was that was early 80s, I think that happened. But I mean, so they're, the deaths of all these people could have been exactly what we were told, right? But for various reasons, we believe other things. And in the Kennedy case, there's some fairly compelling evidence that maybe it didn't go down the way that the government told us it did.
Right.
Marilyn Monroe, because of her involvement with JFK and RFK too. May have been a target for the CIA or maybe the mob to get back at JFK. I mean, there's a variety of things that we can suss out, but it's interesting. So I don't know. I guess in general, I'm not asking about any of these specific ones, right? But I mean, of the ones I named, is there one that you think maybe didn't go down the way that we think it did, the way that we're told it did? I guess I should say.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously JFK would be the one. That would be like the most obviously questionable because of, I don't know, maybe it's his historical significance, who knows. But yeah, I think that, again, this goes back to like one of the questions I asked at the very beginning of this episode, which I think we started recording yesterday. It's a long episode is what I'm getting at for anybody who didn't catch on to that. Is like how much of that is us wanting there to be a good story instead of just like having to deal with the reality of what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and by and large, I think that's the case. But the problem becomes that I think the more ridiculous ones. So I think the Britney Spears one, it becomes so ridiculous that when we start talking about someone else, maybe like Tupac Shakur, we then dismiss it.
Right.
Because if it's not true for Britney, it's not true for Tupac. And if it's not true for Elvis being alive, then it can be true for or if the CIA didn't take out Marilyn Monroe to send a message to JFK about the path he was on, then we can't believe JFK either. So it becomes this thing where I feel like, and like I said, I'm not, I mean, I could individually go through and talk about how likely I think any of those are based on my rather limited knowledge of the subject matter. But I do think that in some cases, the all the time naysayers have made it so much easier for something to go down, because the vast majority of people go, no, that's bullshit. The news said it was this, and that's what it is.
Interesting. Well, I think that on the Tupac front, didn't Suge Knight come out recently and say that he knew who killed Tupac and Biggie?
Yeah, I mean, that's assuming you think Suge Knight is a real
reputable source
of information.
I mean, he could be. Well, that's the thing. He could be telling the truth and be a giant piece of shit at the same time.
Again, yeah, those two are not mutually exclusive. You are correct. But that's, I guess, and this goes on to anything, right? So at what point, I have to imagine that even of the big conspiracy theories, so I'm just gonna throw some out there just off the top of my head, like what the biggest ones are, right? There's JFK, there's the faked moon landing, there's flat Earth, there's 9/11, there's the Illuminati is moving us towards. Oh, this is a fun one. The globalists, the New World Order, this organization is setting us up for the big unification of one world government to be alien attacks.
Okay.
So, of those and then sprinkle in whatever, when I say conspiracy theory, whatever comes to your mind, sprinkle in 5 or 6 more. And you have to imagine that one of those is probably more right than wrong.
Yeah.
But the fact that the other ones exist to say to allow people to say, well, conspiracy theorists are all full of shit. So anytime something's labeled as a conspiracy theory, it automatically loses its credibility by virtue of the name. Then I think we might be fooling ourselves into believing some things that may not necessarily be true.
If you're constantly saying non-credible shit, like if you're saying stuff that's like just patently obviously not true, like the time that you stumble on the truth, and you're trying to get people, it's the boy who cried wolf. Why am I going to believe you this time? You've been feeding me all this garbage all these years. Like I'm just saying it's understandable why people who are inclined to not believe some conspiracy theories typically don't believe most or all.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just sounds like everything sounds like nonsense coming from, certain types of people.
No, yeah. And I mean, and there are those people, and I mentioned earlier that comedian who pretty much believes all of them. And
right.
Then I think to myself, like, is there more harm in believing all of them? Or is there more harm in believing none of them and then missing the one that's super important?
Well, I mean, look at the list right now, and that we talked about. I'm saying this like the listeners. I feel bad now. We have a list of all the things we just talked about, and I'm telling Olivia to look at that. Which one of those is really going to have a negative impact on your life if it's true?
So we skipped one altogether. I just realized as I look at that list. As I look at the list, honestly, probably the government killing people for information they have.
Right, and we were on board with. We both believe that one.
Right? No. But that's what I'm saying. Yes, I agree. But and I say this very hesitantly, right? For the sake of argument, if 9/11 was an inside job, then it's more important for people to believe all the conspiracy theories instead of naysaying every one of them.
So does that make sense? Better to let a guilty man go free than to jail one innocent man. Like that's your
essentially, yeah.
Gotcha.
If one of them could be, if it's the Black Knight satellite, and I'll go out on a limb. I'm pretty sure that the government has evidence of extraterrestrial type stuff. Okay, I'm not saying that they're caged. They have a caged ET. But I'm pretty sure that there's evidence of, whatever, intergalactic space travel, spaceships, maybe aliens or whatever, and they just don't think that the people should know.
Wouldn't it be great? That. I just had a great idea. Follow me on this.
Mm-hmm.
How cool would it be if, how there's all those alien invasion movies and stuff like that? How cool would it be if the government was cooperating with Hollywood to make movies like that, so that they're actually preparing us for an inevitable invasion? They have actual aliens, and then that's how we know what they look like.
Since this is an actual thing that's happening, I don't know how cool it is. Do you know who Tom DeLonge is, the former lead singer of Blink-182?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So he runs, and I don't have it at my fingertips. He runs a society, an association, whatever, that does actually work with the government for those specific reasons, is what his claims are.
That's the coolest thing. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So if you get a chance, and it's lengthy, but it's interesting. And I mean, he's very evasive and stuff. But he was on the Joe Rogan Experience like last year. It was one of the first times I actually watched Joe Rogan because I was looking into Tom DeLonge. And he's on there and he talks about that. And although he doesn't have any information, he has former government employees and he has the support of some people in the government to do exactly that, to combine books and movies and documentaries on aliens and bring to the people. And he thinks that the reason is so that eventually they could acclimate us to that. This now goes into what I said earlier about people saying they're acclimating us into aliens so that they could fake an alien invasion so that we could then, abide by a one world government because we have to be unified as one to fight off the attack. So, I mean, it goes both ways. You know what I mean? It's insanity kind of on both ends. But again, if the government is going to control people through alien invasion that's not real, then maybe it's more important to believe all the conspiracy theories.
By the way, I can't believe you skipped that one. I was so excited. I spent a lot of time getting ready for the one that you skipped on the list. I can't believe you did that.
Here's how it happened. Here's an insight into my brain. We were talking about the Denver airport and that thing you said about the Illuminati and world government. I told myself I'm not going to talk about the Illuminati. I'm not going to talk about. I will sort of jokingly mention globalists and stuff. And then I was like, this is perfect because if we talk about them, then what's more important than them killing people to keep themselves secret, right? So that would be a perfect segue into Michael Hastings and Seth Rich. At any rate, D.B. Cooper, for the uninitiated, pulled off one of the greatest heists of all time. This is not a conspiracy. This is all fact. So I'm not even sure where this falls on the conspiracy theory list, quite honestly, because it doesn't fit with the other stuff. But he hijacked an airplane and skydove out of it in order to elude the authorities with $200,000. But this happened in the very early 70s, I believe, right? So $200,000 was a pretty decent amount of money. But yeah, that's essentially the story, right? And apparently to nearly this day, until 2 days ago, we really didn't know who DB Cooper was. That was an alias that he used.
Yeah, which is really funny. So I think the reason that this qualifies as a conspiracy is mostly because it's just like a super unsolved case. Almost like at the level of, it's always been kind of at the level of like the Zodiac killer, like this criminal who had just always eluded law enforcement. And so the conspiracy was like, who did it, I think is what it comes down to. And, I like that the DB Cooper thing. 'Cause he referred to himself as Dan Cooper and no one really knows where DB Cooper came from. Like it was never
the most fascinating part of it, right? It's listed as a media miscommunication.
Yeah. It's a mix up in communication. So, but Livius shared an article with me from the New York Daily News in which, it claims, and I'll read the headline: the search for DB Cooper, investigators say they've confirmed Skyjacker's identity by decoding long lost confession. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so they've had a pretty good idea of who they thought it was for a while, but they were able to put together. This was a guy that went ahead and taunted the authorities on top of extorting some money, and so that $200,000, by the way, because I have an article pulled up, is the equivalent to $1.2 million today. Yeah. So a pretty significant amount of money. So this case was open for like 45 years. Yeah. So it happened in 1971. He jumped out of a Boeing 727, and at first they were saying there's no way he could have survived the jump because of the terrain he jumped into and stuff. But ultimately, they'd have proven who DB Cooper is by matching up some coded correspondence that they had that they attributed to a man by the name of
Robert Rackstraw.
And they matched it up to basically a taunting letter from DB Cooper, and were able to pretty, I don't know. I read the article, so I don't know how much they're forcing to fit because it's weird. It's like his use of the word "unk" somehow turned into code for something else that they were able to match up in something else. But they've suspected for a little while that this is who it was, and now they have evidence. Sorry, dude, I'm just reading this. Hold on a second. Rackstraw served in 2 Sherwood's units. So is he still alive?
So he's still alive, and he's living, I guess, in San Diego is what the article says. I watched a video where a reporter, like a news crew, went to this Robert Rackstraw guy and interviewed him, and he was very standoffish, and he wouldn't answer questions, but he wouldn't categorically say, no, I am not DB Cooper. And so it was kind of like there wasn't a lot of substance to it, but like, yeah, the dude is alive, and they were at like a marina or something, and he kept trying to walk away from them, and he was, they were following him and saying, why can't you just tell me no? Why can't you just tell me no? And he was, I guess he fits the bill because he has a military background and was like, I'm guessing a paratrooper or something like that. So he fits the bill and everything. And would not say on camera that I'm not DB Cooper.
I wonder how I'm gonna have to look into this. I wonder how they proceed. I don't know what the statute of limitations is on, I don't know, extortion. Well, I guess. And
I have a little information on this.
Okay.
The original charge they had against him, him being an entity they didn't really know the actual identity of, was something that had a 5-year statute of limitations, and then they changed it to charging him with a crime that has no statute of limitations. So realistically, they could arrest him and try him. But I mean, what evidence is there after 45 years, right? Like the letter.
Yeah, it gets interesting though, because he was so cocky. I mean, a confession is possible. He may say, look, I'm 74 years old. I don't know what his health is like. You know what I mean? That he might be like, you know what? Fuck it. Yeah, I eluded the FBI for that long.
Yeah, I mean, like, if he's a sociopath, which the article is saying, like, he might, and a narcissist, he might want the credit or the recognition, Mm-hmm. So it might be worth, like, a cushy few years in jail for the rest of your life to be, like, the guy who notoriously was, like, the most, like, talked about criminal or whatever.
And you pull off this, well, near-perfect heist, I guess we'll say. Now, we'll say near-perfect heist. I think there's part of you that almost wants some recognition for that. Right. And if you're late enough in life, maybe that's the right thing to do. I mean, like, obviously there are a lot of terrible things, but I would have to imagine that I was going to say one of the worst things, but that's probably belittling a lot of other things, is to pull off something and never get any credit for it. To never be able to take credit for doing the best of, in this case, this heist, and this eluding the FBI. There has to be a terrible thing like a weight of saying, I just want people to acknowledge that I'm the fucking guy that did it. I'm the guy who pulled it off.
Can I ask, because I kind of skimmed the article. Does it say was it the law enforcement agency that deciphered it, or was it someone else? So this is a guy who's a TV producer who deciphered this, is what it seems like to me, right?
Yeah, I mean, the articles are saying cold case investigator, so I know there are like TV shows that do nothing but look at cold cases.
Non-governmental. Here's where I'm going with this. The case was closed by the FBI in 2015, so it just got closed like a couple years ago. I'm sure these people have been like privately investigating it forever, because why not? Because if you nail Cooper 45 years after it happens, boom. I mean, like, there's a lot that comes with that. You get book deals, you get movie deals, you get whatever. You get that Netflix series like The Staircase or whatever that's just dropped. So that's got to be a big thing. But I'm thinking about the other thing, it's eluding me. Patton Oswalt's wife, who wrote that book about the Bay Area, the killer in the Bay Area, the rapist / murderer, that only recently got solved right after
the Golden State Killer.
Yeah. Like, that's another non-law enforcement person who cracks a decades old case. Like, this seems to be like a trend right now. Like, is it just that like people are focusing more on investigating for why is it? I'm trying to figure out.
I don't know. Is that who Patton Oswalt's wife wrote the book about?
Yeah, Michelle McNamara or whatever. Yeah, that's what that book was about.
So I didn't realize she wrote a book about it, but that is interesting because of how he was captured. So for anybody who doesn't know, Ancestry.com, or I'm not sure if it was that or that 23andMe.
I think it was 23andMe.
Yeah, they had DNA from this guy, and then they ran it against one of the 23andMe apparently websites and found a match. And from there, it didn't take long. So, i.e., Rob sends in for 23andMe, right? And they wind up contacting the company and saying, hey, can you give us some DNA on this too? And they find out that this person is, I believe it was a cousin, as closely related as a cousin to the person whose DNA you gave us. And then it turns out that, through Rob submitting that, they find out that, some relative of his is, I don't know, whatever, the Golden State Killer, essentially, which is really weird, right? Because that's not one of the consequences that you expect from, like, 23andMe. You're like, oh, I found out I'm 4% Norwegian. Like, their commercials don't say things like, oh, I found out that I'm related to a serial killer and that he's still alive and wanted by the police.
Yeah, my DNA ratted out my cousin.
Oh, God, that's crazy. So, at any rate, it's an interesting way. I mean, I'm glad they caught him.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, I'm sure there have been a ton of articles written on privacy and Ancestry.com after that. I don't know what people thought before then, but yeah, that's a little bit weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I were the lawyer, I'd be like fighting the admissibility of that, but because I would want my client to go free. That's where I'm
sure.
going.
No. I know. I understand it. I don't. Yeah. I mean, it's a weird and tricky thing. And as technology continues to improve, we're going to see probably more stuff either proven or more people lately have been let go from prison sentences because of technology and the ability to analyze DNA in ways we weren't before, or that kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting to see how many conspiracy theories will be proven or debunked by the use of modern technology.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So DB Cooper, here's the thing, like, they deciphered a letter, but I mean, is that compelling evidence?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
know. So I guess I'm out on the DB Cooper one.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know that there was much of a conspiracy in that one. You know what I mean?
It's just fun to talk about because it was
that's
solved.
What I'm saying. Like, I don't know if I believe it or not. I mean, I believe that it happened. And I believe likely they finally got the guy.
And that's the thing. Like, I think there's a little bit of romance and sexiness to, like, a lot of these stories. Like the Denver airport, like all that crazy shit. That's like a sexy story about because airports are like pretty much the worst places to ever be. But like this puts some mystique on Denver airport that like doesn't happen in other, so there's a little bit of like pizzazz to the story, to like the stories being true. So
for sure. Now, but be honest and upfront. Rob asked me to come up with my own personal conspiracy theory for this episode. And here's what happens. I probably buy into enough conspiracy theories that it was impossible for me to come up with. Like, I'd start thinking about things that I thought could be true, and I realized that all I'm doing is rehashing conspiracy theories I kind of believe. But Rob, I understand that you have a conspiracy theory. I mean, this is going to be the start to your YouTube channel. Is that correct?
Well, we'll see. We'll see how you're going to be my test audience right now, which is a total lie because I know we've talked about this before, but for the sake of the podcast. So in the town that I live in, Lake Zurich, Illinois, there are within a half of a mile of the main road, in a half a mile stretch, 3 separate mattress stores. And that's insane. And you start to wonder, like, because you never see a customer in any one. Like, there's never anybody in there shopping, and you start to wonder, like, how can something stay open where practically nobody ever shops there? And especially now with like every podcast is trying to sell you a Casper mattress or one of those. There's that one hot chick with the purple, you see her on Facebook or whatever. She's breaking eggs and stuff. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So, like, how can a mattress company stay in business. And the only like so, and I think this is the sexy explanation. This is why that I've thought this is like it's got to be a front for the mob. And so I'm gonna take your initial reaction to that thought, and then I'm gonna up the stakes with my own personal experience shopping in a mattress store, and then we'll see if that changes your mind at all.
I'm a little less likely to believe that than most conspiracy theories you talked about today. Although I do like the idea that they move money around, it just stuffed in the mattresses. Like the delivery guys, when you see them go, if you see them go out the back with one, there's just like $50 bills stuffed in the mattress, and that would be a good way to transport them. Because who, after seeing all those movies, who would think that somebody actually is hiding money inside of a mattress?
It would be like poetic in a way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Like so obvious that
right.
nobody would
like
think.
that. No one would ever. Yeah, hiding in plain sight. So are you just based on that? You in or out on this?
Out.
All right. So let me tell you about the time that I bought a mattress at one of these mattress stores, and then we'll see how and then I got some more information after this. So like, we're going back to probably 2005 or so. I was living in Wakanda at the time, and we're not talking about the place from the movie Black Panther. We're talking about the place where I know the mayor, because he's the stepdad of Adam and Oshkosh, whose legs don't work. And I went to this random store, and like I'd never bought a bed before. I was like 20. Like I always had a bed because my parents bought me a bed. So I didn't know how the hell it worked. I didn't know how much a bed really cost. And so I went in there with unreasonable expectations, and the guy's like, "You're crazy." But
you were like, "I got $75. What do you got for a mattress?"
And I'm like, "Why? What can a bed cost? A few $100s?" I was way off. I was a dumb young person. And so the guy's like, "Well, here, I'll tell you what. This is where it starts." He's wearing a full-on like suit, and he's this short, fat, obviously very Italian guy with his hair just straight slicked back. So he's stepping into a stereotype from the get-go of, mob front kind of thing. I would imagine a guy like this is working there. He's like, "Well, I'll tell you what. Someone ordered this California King bed, and they never picked it up. So I gotta move it. I'll give it to you for I think $900, but you have to pay cash." And I was like, He's like, "Here, look," and he shows me the paper, like random paper. He probably, he could have fucking made this up, all of it. He could have ripped me off. I don't know, but like he shows me this paperwork that shows usually it costs like $1,800 or $2,000 or something like that. So it's a great deal. And I was like, all right, well, let me go get some cash and something to bring a bed home in. And it did. I gave him $900 in cash. Got myself this sweet bed that was so nice. It was a beautiful bed. And like just. I pulled up to the back door, knocked on the door opens up, I give the guy the cash, we load up the bed, and that was it. And I was like, this is the shadiest shit that I've ever done in my life. So that plus, so now what do you think? Are you in?
I'm still out, but I'm pretty sure that went something like this. So those stores, and I don't even know why I have this information, to be honest. Like, it's always one person works there, open to close.
Yeah.
So there's never like anybody else around, right? So what I'm thinking is like that guy's mattress shipment showed up, and he's checking in the mattresses, and he gets to the end. He goes, "Well, what the fuck is this? This isn't on my list." And it's a California King mattress that was delivered errantly to him. It was supposed to go to the place that's a block further down. And they're trying to like figure out where this mattress is, right? Because, it's only been, they do 3 deliveries in 1 mile, and then they have to go back to the warehouse.
Right.
And I'm thinking that was his. The whole cash thing was exactly that. I'm selling this off the books because I can. And I just made $900 on top of whatever my salary is for being here 14 hours a day by myself or whatever. Gotcha.
Okay. So that makes sense. That's a valid explanation of my specific situation. I still can't justify, and it must not have been you I was talking to. I think it was my other friend, John Gatwood, who reminds me, you guys are like twins and everything. Mm-hmm. I might have been talking to him about it, and he basically explained what I'm reading right now in the conspiracy subreddit. in a thread called "Your Local Mattress Stores Are Money Laundering Fronts," and I feel like it was John, and he kind of explained the same thing. So here's a comment that says, "I used to manage a furniture store about 14 years ago. The markup for furniture, including mattresses, is insane. Literally, it's about 400% markup before any financing costs are tacked on. I was able to get a nice new mattress for cost, which was like less than $200. So like basically this guy's saying is the markup, the margin that you have on things like mattresses and furniture is so insane that you can afford to take like lots of cuts. But also, like, imagine you sell something at full price to some dupe who doesn't know that you can talk someone down a lot on price. You sell a set at full price, and you just paid your rent for like probably the week or whatever.
Right. So in that situation, I see what you're saying. Like he used his, whatever annual discount,
right,
to buy a mattress for $300, saw you coming, and resold it to you for $900.
Yeah.
Which is also, that's also very possible. I can see that happening. I mean, that happens a lot anyway. I mean, you and I both worked for retailers, and it's actually in at least I can think of 2 retailers I worked with. The code of conduct does not allow you to resell anything you've purchased with your discount. Especially, I mean, I've never worked anywhere where cost was my discount, because that could be really interesting depending on what the items are. So
I just debunked my own personal conspiracy by...
you just naysayed your own conspiracy. This is the problem with you. You even had a conspiracy theory you don't believe in. So.
That's how much of a skeptic I am. I don't even trust myself.
All right, well, I'm glad we brought this on to a lighter note. This went really, really long, so thanks for listening. If you've listened to both volumes of Booked Conspiracy Theories, or whatever we wound up calling this, do want to take a moment for anybody who's still here to acknowledge new Patreon contributors. Look, I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can. The globalists don't want you to listen to this podcast, and you are the resistance. The only way to stop the globalists from their takeover of literature everywhere is to contribute and help fund this operation by contributing at patreon.com/booked. For as little as $1 a month, you help fund the war against the New World Order that doesn't want you reading good books. They only want you reading 50 Shades of Grey. They want to dumb you down. They want you to listen to awful podcasts that contain no substance or humor whatsoever. You can do it. You can help fight the war by contributing at patreon.com/booked. And our newest warriors, we have new warriors in the fight. And the first one, hopefully I don't butcher this name, Leanne Abe. Thank you for your contribution and your support to this podcast. Tip of the spear right here, fighting the globalists.
Do you want me to mention the other?
Yeah, I know you're not going to do with anywhere near as much pizzazz as I just did, so I'm going to let you pull this one.
I don't have that fire that Livius is doing right now, but our other, what are we calling them, warriors?
I don't know. I was just making stuff up off the top of my head.
It was very compelling. Like I was with you I was like, I'll die for you, Livius. Nate Lehman. That's how I'm going to go with that. Nate Lehman, also a new contributor. Thanks, guys. Thanks both of you for joining. I don't really know what we did to get you. Maybe you just stumbled upon us. Maybe we did something. If there was a specific thing that we did that got you to give us money, let us know so that we can do more of that stuff. And also, whatever global domination fighting, we'll do that too.
Also that.
Also that.
I want to make sure you at least acknowledge that we have to do that too.
Yeah,
so.
I'm on board for whatever Livius is talking about.
Next is a book called The Brick Eaters, which the band The Residents. Maybe some conspiracy theory talk there. I have finished the book, and now I'm going to spend probably about 15 or 20 minutes at some point this week looking into this mystery of who the Residents actually are. But that's what you're going to hear next. There will also be spoiler talk. If you're a Patreon contributor, the next episode will contain spoiler talk, I promise, because I already read the book, and there's things that need to be discussed that we're not going to discuss in the regular episode. So until then, thank you for funding the war on poor literary choices and globalism. Until next time, I'm Livius Nedden.
And I'm Rob Olson. Keep reading and fighting the power or something.